for Q&A today, so we won't be able to get through all of them, but we'll also be posting some of them with their answers after the event as well. Yeah, and so I guess I'd like to welcome the speakers back. And also, thank you, Glenn and Frank, and I think Kevin as well. Yeah, you're here too. Yay. For coming in as the first talk and hanging out until the Q&A session. I know it's been a bit of a gap between, but thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers speaking. Yeah. So just looking through our questions, we've got quite a few of them. I guess I'll start with questions for the Ample Organics team, if that's fine with you. Perfect. The first question we had come in was around how do you handle your volumes? Do you use stateful workloads?
The app is stateless, so we don't have any volumes to have to manage or handle, fortunately, or unfortunately, however you want to think about it.
Awesome. And another question was, did you try using Proxy instead of Fabio? And did you feel like there was anything missing in Fabio, or did it just work?
It just worked. There's good examples for each of those on the HashiCorp Learn site. But if you look at them, most of the other ones you have to provide some sort of a config, either through a volume mount or a here doc of some sort. With Fabio, you don't. It really is just need to provide a tag with your service, and that tag is basically like a URL, like a match. So generally, what it is like you have some URL, could be an endpoint, API endpoint, let's say. That's mapped to a specific service, and then when somebody goes to your URL, the DNS resolves to the load balancer. Load balancer goes to Fabio, and Fabio finds the service that's a match to your request URL. And that's pretty much it. No configs to manage, and even like with new deploys, or if you add extra services or whatnot, like you don't have to update any configs at all. You just have the that tag templated into your job spec, and it just works.
Awesome, thank you. So for the next question, I'll start by asking our Ample Organics team, I guess. Sorry, I'm trying to differentiate and I'm trying to say it so you know what to expect, and it's a little bit weird to do it live, but I'll ask you first, and then after you give an answer, I'll probably open this one up to the HashiCorp team as well, if anybody would like to answer, just a heads up. It's a bit longer. So it says, what is the direct benefit to developers for maintainability and ease of use to use Nomad rather than non-Nomad? For instance, given a partially private server or partially private AWS cloud or Vault Dynamic secrets leveraging, there's some more examples, and you deploy that through a typical pipeline version controlled with Git and frequently iterated on, how would Nomad help you to simplify developer and DevOps interactions rather than complicate it? I can also post that in chat to the panels if it's easier to be able to reread it while answering.
I could take this too, unless Frank or Kevin, you want to?
This is more of a technical statement, so I'll leave that for you, Glenn or Kevin.
I would leave it to you, Glenn, and then I'll give my developer perspective after. If that makes sense.
Managing Nomad ACLs I found was easier than managing Kubernetes. So for that, if you need to create any service accounts to do anything, I found it was easier to manage there. In terms of, say, like the secrets management, all that is kind of templated out for us, at least the way we do it is it's templated out in the job spec. And I think the thing that really makes it easier for developers. You can correct me if I'm wrong or if I miss anything, Kevin. But with Kubernetes, if you want to access a particular pod or container, you're going to have to be able to see. You need to get the pods. You need to get the names, right? And usually, it's like your deployment name, and then a replica set ID and a unique pod ID. So you're going to have to get that. But most of the time, you don't really care specifically. If you're running multiple instances of something, most of the time you don't really care which one you go into, unless there's an issue with a particular pod. But if you don't care with Nomad, you don't have to specify that kind of info. You just have to specify, what tasks and what job name that you want to run a particular command or get a shell with, and it'll just randomly pick one for you, right? Of course, you can also specify the allocation ID of a specific task that you want to go in, that you want to get a shell into. But if you don't, then yeah, you don't have to find those other details, and which makes it easy to constantly iterate or redeploy or whatever. And if you're trying to get a shell into a particular job each time to check something or to do something while you're developing stuff, you don't have to do a cube get pods and find what the pod name is every time, right? Because it's going to be different with every deploy. And if you don't care about that, then Nomad can make that a lot easier for you.
Yeah, to further what Glenn said, that's what I was thinking as well. I believe that the developer, if they want to know all the details, they could like learn about it and understand, but I don't see it as a necessary requirement. The tools should be there to make it so they can for lack of a better term, do their job, like get everything up and running for all the work they put in already through the code. They don't need to get it necessarily to get into the specifics. And as Glenn, as an example, it just Nomad makes it a bit easier and a bit less complicated to get in there and do the steps they need to do so they can actually see their work actually shown on like whatever server they need to. I think the divide between a developer and an infrastructure, the DevOps and stuff, they can be separated depending on the person and their wants. And Nomad allows that, so the developer can focus, if their focus is on just on the code, that they can focus just on that. Yeah, and then as in our talk earlier, the one example of the exec shell access, that's just another just in our, I can only speak from my perspective, but just having that ability instead of needing like a CLI tools set up or the right browser configuration or whatever to get into it, just allows the developer to work a bit faster and a bit more efficiently for what their goals are.
Awesome. And just to refresh for the Hashi folks, the question was around, where did I put it? Immediately lost it. So what is the direct benefit to developers for maintainability and ease of use to Nomad? And how does Nomad simplify developer and DevOps interactions rather than complicate? If any Hashi folks would like to take a stab at it.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I love hearing Ample Organic's perspective on this. That's super useful for us to kind of hear people's perspectives, users' perspectives. I think the way we look at it a lot of times on the Nomad team is, well, and in HashiCorp in general, is we like to talk about workflows, not technology. No matter what technology you use, you need a deployment workflow. You have to have some way to get code off your developers' machines, running on servers, and users actually able to reach that. Nomad, console, Vault, all of those things. That's one way to accomplish that. Kubernetes, obviously, another way. I love the example too that Ample Organics gave, where they also evaluated ECS. We see that a lot as well, because ECS is a great way. It's like, okay, our developers know how to make containers. Here's a way we can run those in the cloud. And we see a lot of people doing that kind of as a first step, but there's just really still a lot of gaps that people have to fill in themselves in that world. And so we kind of see Nomad fitting well into that place in between ECS and Kubernetes, might be the easiest way to put it, where we actually don't do everything Kubernetes does. Kubernetes has a very strong ingress networking model that Nomad just doesn't force you to worry about. Your network is Nomad's network. Your ingress, whether you want to use cloud load balancers, Fabio, whatever, Nomad kind of leaves that up to you. There's more Nomad could do there. Stay tuned. But today, that's there's just no abstractions you need to worry about. And so Nomad is kind of in this position where your developers might know how to build containers, and you need a way to deploy those, but you need more features than just ECS can handle. You need more advanced health checking, more advanced deployment workflows. You need that single pane of glass for managing everything, from deployments to execing into a container, to debug it, to viewing logs. You can cobble all of these things together with other services, or you can use a monolithic service like Kubernetes to kind of get a lot of the same features. But I think you have this complexity no matter what. Everybody needs to be able to debug their services. Everybody needs to be able to deploy their services. Whether you DIY it all or not, this complexity exists somewhere in your stack.
Awesome. Thank you. I was like, where'd the mute button go? Virtual events. So I guess kind of coming out of that, so somebody in chat had mentioned that they had a problem with trying to convince people to switch to Nomad from whatever service that they were using before, as most people just don't believe in the simplicity or the ease of use. I guess, do you have any tips or tricks that they could come back and share? This is open. I'm sorry.
If you, I browse Reddit a lot, and on quite often, there are tales from users who have made the switch, kind of like us, to Nomad, and then they're saying how grateful they were, how they it's something that they wish that they had found out about or tried before they spent hair pulling months getting Kubernetes to work. And Kubernetes is great too, but a lot of there's also an equal amount of horror stories out there of people who have tried to use Kubernetes and it didn't work out for them. And all I can say is honestly, the simplicity from Nomad is huge. Like it like I said, it taking the complexity out allows you more time to focus on the other stuff, like as Michael said, right? Like the workflow and stuff, right? And those are things that will add to your deployment velocity and whatnot.
To tack on to Glenn's, when he was, I think Nomad demos as well. When Glenn was showing us switching over, and he just wanted to give me like what it could look like. It was pretty reasonably simple to understand what was going on from the way he explained it, and him showing like how he's done set up a few jobs and stuff, and how it could be available for the developers. And I've had demos for other systems like Kubernetes and stuff, and they were a bit more complicated, a bit harder to understand. It demoed well. So showing off, if you can, it running and proving it on the fly is a bit easier, I found, at least from Glenn to me.
That's really exciting to hear, Kevin. Yeah, because that was actually fits in well with what I was going to suggest, and exactly what it sounds like Ample Organics did, which is, get that proof of concept cluster set up. Have something with 3 jobs running or something like that. Nothing ambitious, no big deal, or even just my silly Django and Postgres cluster, like just something where you have a job, a few allocations to look at. And I hope if you can walk somebody through that in the Nomad UI or in the Nomad CLI, they should be pretty well, but the Nomad UI just makes it so easy to move so quickly through, honestly, the vast amount of state involved in running services. Like, let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot of details at work here. Anytime you're running the service, whether it's in ECS, Nomad, Kubernetes, virtual machines, whatever, you have ports, you have addresses, you have resources that are getting used, live resources versus available resources, logs, exec, there's just a lot of concepts. But I think if you have that proof of concept, you can really walk people through these concepts. The UI is great for that because you can just go top to bottom. Here's the exec button. Here's the stop button. Everybody knows what a stop button does. Here's where you can click through and view logs for your allocation. Who doesn't want to be able to go from running a job to looking at its logs in 2 clicks that take, 3 seconds to load? The UI should be nice and snappy too, which I also find is really nice when using other systems, a lot of like heavy cloud consoles, and you click and then you sit back and you wait 10 seconds for the cloud console to kind of load all your infrastructure, and then you get to click one more time and wait 10 more. And it shouldn't be that at all. You should have your proof of concept and be able to run through that UI really quickly. And I hope it clicks with people. I hope they can immediately kind of see how quick and easy it is to get to the information they need.
So I think we've had a chance to hear from Glenn and Kevin a little bit, but I'd love to hear something from Frank as well. Not to put you on the spot or anything. I was wondering if you could talk us through some of either the key, I guess, drivers, or I guess just, yeah, things that kind of were, well, I can't speak, things that were driving forces from a business perspective that convinced your team to move to Nomad.
Okay, so when I joined Ample Organics, they had a task for me, which was basically clean up their operational side of their environment, of their department. When walking into it, when you look at stability, the team was firefighting the Kubernetes environments nightly. Customer tickets were increasing. Obviously, customer experience was lacking. Part of that came back down to how the Kubernetes was designed and implemented. The other part of it was the technical skills to manage and support what was implemented. So that there we had to resolve. And part of that was looking down this path of going down ECS or Nomad. With Nomad, it brings that the easeability of implementing a solution using, of course, HashiLearn and all the documentation that's provided, as well as we get the support from the vendor to help us along the journey if there's any issues. The other part was time to market, how the environment was deployed with Kubernetes. We were pushing out, like when I joined, about 8 releases a week, and out of those 8 releases, 4 were successful, and the other 4 were unfortunately not. By going down this Nomad approach with utilizing other tool sets, we were actually able to start deploying releases 125, I believe, in an hour. So when you look at time to market, from the product side of the fence, they're thumbs up, they're all happy. So that was another check mark. And the other part was cost. My costs were going through the roof with Kubernetes clusters per customer. So by redesigning the infrastructure with Nomad and making a multi-tenant platform, we were able to cut our costs by almost half. So these were some of the driving factors. And then of course, the last one is obviously security. We're with Vault, and we just wanted to increase our security posture, and have the integration with Nomad and Vault helps with that. So with those criterias, putting forth to the senior team, obviously it's a no-brainer. And they're all check marks, and obviously with a team that running with a lean team, you need to ensure that your uptime is always there, and our customers were always the number one focus.
That makes sense. I haven't actually had a chance to say it to any of you because I haven't met you prior to this before, but I think the Nomad team might remember that when we had it come across that, oh, we're going to be doing things with Ample, I was super excited because I'm Toronto based and I've worked with a couple other Ample employees. So I was like, oh, yay. So I'm still very excited that we're all here, but let's see. Sorry, I'm just like also trying to read through questions on the side and see what is a good one to ask. We do have quite a few about best practices. So I guess this will probably be another twofold kind of for the Ample team. Was there any practices that you ran across that I guess you'd like to share that were good? I can't words, but I guess anything you kind of encountered while you were setting up the clusters or the infrastructure that you'd consider to be best practices. This can also be from a business standpoint, because I know that there is that perspective when you're considering what kind of architecture to do. So, yeah.
So I'll start from the business side. Obviously, security and segregation is a key factor. So ensure that all of your environments are segregated by how the platform has been designed, as well as your ingress egress rules have to be in place. I know Glenn will probably have a lot more to talk about than I would, because he's the one that actually implemented it. Glenn?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of the stuff, and I've said this before, but like there's a lot of good content on the HashiCorp Learn site and their documentation in general. They have a lot of good examples. So a lot of the it's not Nomad or console specific. It's all the same kind of stuff, right? Like having your certs, proper ACLs, things like that. I guess one of the things is, and it's also it's also mentioned on the Nomad site, but one of the ACL perms they recommend you disabling, especially for prod, is the anonymous perms. So what that means is, like, when you go to the web UI, if you don't have a token to log in with, you don't see anything, right? You don't see your the jobs and whatnot. Whereas otherwise users can kind of get like read only. You would be able to go in without any credentials and see what jobs are running, et cetera, et cetera. That might be good for a POC cluster, but not for prod, right? So yeah, I guess those would be some of the best practices. And when we implemented Nomad, there weren't as many job spec templating options. Obviously now there's Levant, and what we used Ansible. We used Ansible roles and we templated with that. So I think with the job specs, at least I tend to find it to be a lot more cleaner and easier to read versus the Kubernetes deployment manifests. But yeah, like it's anything deployment related or best practices related. A lot of it you can kind of find out from the documentation. It's all pretty good.
And I guess, Chris, do you have anything to add? Again, not to put you on the spot, just if you do.
No, not at all.
That's okay. Sorry. I was like, oh, I should pull you in, but then I was like, maybe not like that. So another question that we had come in was, is there a starter template or project for a minimal, secure Nomad console vault deployment?
I feel like I should start with setting up a full production Nomad cluster, following all of our best practices, is not as easy today as we want it to be. Like, let me make that clear. The sample repo that I posted today has a Terraform folder in it. That should get you started with a lot of the basics. But like one of the things Glenn was just talking about, ACLs. ACLs are something that aren't included in that. You have to set those up separately after the initial cluster deployment yourself and figure out how to get all of that orchestrated if you want to make that reproducible. So it's unfortunately a multi-step job still right now. You have this Terraform that will get you 99% of the way there, but it doesn't cover everything. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, like also like Glenn mentioned, learn.hashicorp.com is the place to go for everything. Just absolutely great guides. I go there a lot to remember how to do things. So I don't know if anybody has any other resources that they really like for as far as getting started with Nomad or best practices for Nomad or production clusters for Nomad. Yeah, that's probably it for me though.
I mean, my favorite plug every time I get asked this question is that Kent, one of our, I think he's a security engineer. I'm really bad at remembering people's titles when they're not like right in front of me. He did a fantastic GCP guide that would be a good place to start from. I don't think it has Vault, but I'll link it in the two chats right now. It's a Terraform Nomad console GCP guide that I've actually used for a previous talk, and it's very easy to get up and running, and it is actually probably more secure than some of the other clusters I've built in the past. So he's actually a security engineer. I'm not. It was great. But yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if I cut anyone off there by accident, if anyone else had suggestions. If not, another link I just got in a back channel is also Chris's Vagrant cluster. So it's a bit of a different approach than the GCP one. And it does appear to also have Vault. So I will link that in the chat as well. And yeah, I think otherwise, some of us behind the scenes are currently working on some Nomad starter modules for AWS and Azure as well, but we'll see how long it kind of takes to put that together because it's a good like cross team. Yeah. So another question we have in is, would it be possible to add a pre-start task that can provision a volume using Terraform and have the Terraform job register that volume on Nomad? And if so, would we have a demo HCL file for the same?
I'll take that one. The answer is yes. Sort of anything is possible with Nomad and Terraform and Nomad and Terraform and Nomad and Terraform if you wrap it enough times and twirl it around enough. So if you're not familiar with this, we have a Nomad provider for Terraform, and it pretty much tries to expose all the different resources in the Nomad API, all the different nouns, all the different verbs. So it's a very useful provider, but the thing that you need to keep in mind, and you will discover very quickly if you start to use it, is that Terraform is an infrastructure provisioning tool. There are certain things that exist in Nomad that you can consider as infrastructure. So if I'm using Terraform to set up my Nomad cluster, I'm using Terraform to provision EBS instances, I'm using the Terraform Nomad provider to run a CSI controller, run CSI plugins as system jobs, and register these EBS volumes as Nomad volumes against that. This is an infrastructure level concern. It's the sort of thing you're going to do on day zero when you're setting these sorts of things up. When you start getting into using the Nomad Terraform provider to just run Nomad jobs, either because you have a Nomad job that runs Terraform to run other Nomad jobs, you can do that sort of stuff. Plenty of people do that successfully. We have customers who've spoken about their usage of Nomad in Terraform and Nomad in Terraform, all the way down. But you just need to keep in mind that, Terraform, you run Terraform apply, it goes off, it does its thing, and then it's done. That's it, right? There's nothing watching that anymore. So that's one of the shortcomings that you're going to run into if you start trying to use Terraform for more dynamic operations. Just something to keep in mind.
For the question of volume creation, because am I dreaming? This question was creating a volume with Terraform in a pre-start task. Okay. Nomad 1.1 which is our next release coming out. Oh, I don't know. I shouldn't make deadline promises. 6 weeks or so. But we'll have CSI volume creation, which will hopefully be a first-class solution to this problem. So you don't have to worry about Terraform at all. You don't have to worry about where Terraform's running. Yeah. So we should be having a first-class solution to this problem coming soon.
Perfect. Thank you. So I had a couple different Levant and templating questions as well that came in. So hello, Chris. I guess anyone else could take them too that's familiar on the team. But the first one we had was, does Levant allow us to parameterize job names?
Yeah. So actually the Levant, again, it just treats it as a string. So any point, there's nothing in the job spec that Levant can't parameterize because it's just a string as far as Levant is concerned. When my understanding is when the Internet Archives team moved from Levant over to HCL2, that was the one thing that they couldn't touch. Our current templating for the Nomad job spec, HCL2 doesn't have access to the Nomad job. There's an open issue file against this. It's going to be fixed. So that'll be accessible via HCL2 right now. But today, if you did want to use one of HCL2 or Levant to parameterize the job name, your only choice would be Levant.
You may or may not have answered this, but if I have am I able to template the task web where web can be substituted with user supplied parameters?
The task web.
So
Yeah.
is it the task name is what they're wanting to template?
That's a good question. I will post the exact text into the channel we have if that helps.
Yeah, but with HCL2, you should have the ability to parameterize task names. Worst case scenario, if that for some reason isn't directly templatable, there's a hack where you can use a dynamic block because the task name is actually just a label on the block. So the worst case scenario would be a hack where you use a dynamic block to get that in there, which explicitly allows you to set the labels. That doesn't work for jobs yet, but for another reason. But yeah, and then of course you can also do it with Levant.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And while we're here, hey Nick, I have a question for you. I know you're answering Zoom chat questions, and it's really appreciated because it's been really nice to see all the discussion. Somebody was wondering, how did you generate that flame graph?
Yeah, so that's actually part of so Go has a pprof like debug web server that you can include, or you can, and with that you can use Go's command line tooling. I can't remember if it's Go pprof or Go tool pprof. I don't remember the exact command off the top of my head, but you can basically hit that remote debugging endpoint. If you're running Nomad, you can set debug equals true in the configuration, and when you do that, it will run the profile and spit out a pprof. I think it's a pprof file. You're able to use the tooling to basically just start a local HTTP server and browse that profile. You can look at flame graphs. You can look at different visualizations of that. There's like a call, just a call graph of all of the functions. So it's, for me, that it was all using Go's built-in tooling for that.
Awesome. And we're just coming up on time. So I think we're going to wrap up the Q&A for now. And as I mentioned earlier, but just to refresh, we're going to be doing some Q&A afterwards as well, but like via text so that you can still get some of your questions answered. There was 4 pages of questions, so there was a lot. And I really appreciate your enthusiasm. And yeah, thank you. And with that, slides. We'll also be sharing slides afterwards. And I feel like there's one I'm missing, but there's a lot of text, so I don't know which one it is. But yeah, so we'll also have our regular community office hours for Nomad happening soon. So if there's any extra questions you had that we didn't get to ask now, please feel free to bring them there. And thank you so much to our speakers for coming on today. It would not be an event without you here generously sharing your knowledge and talking to everybody. And yeah, thank you so much to our community as well. Again, the chat was great. I loved it. I'm actually gonna have to go back and read most of it because there's a lot of really good feedback in there I want to capture and lots of questions. And just thank you everyone for joining us today and coming out. I'm going to be ending our live share from the Zoom end so that there's a couple of minutes left for anybody in YouTube chat who wants to wrap up. You'll have about 3 to 5 minutes. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And I stopped the share.